Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Vinyl Den, your channel for record collecting by record collectors. I'm Nick. Today I'm going to be talking about some of my favorite reissues of 2022. There's a bunch of links down below. Make sure you go check all those out. There's links for the Vinyl Den Facebook group, for our merch page, for the Spotify and Apple Music weekly playlist that we put together, and also the Patreon page. Make sure you go check all that out. Of course, if you enjoyed the episode, make sure you give me the old thumbs up, hit that subscribe button down below, and make sure you hit that notification bell so you're notified every time I release new episodes. So I think 2022 was a fantastic year for music. We had a lot of great new music that came out, and also a bunch of great reissues, stuff that had been out of print for years and years that finally got reissued this year. And I put a whole list together. To be completely honest, it ended up being a really long list. So I'm going to do half the list today, and I'll release part 2 tomorrow with the second half of the list. And actually, it could have been even 3 videos with as many great reissues as we saw this year. But I kind of trimmed it down. I'm going to do 10 today and 10 tomorrow. So the 10 I'm going to talk about today, none of these are in any kind of order. Really, any of the 20 over the next 2 videos aren't in really any kind of order. They're just some of my favorites. Like I said, the list, actually I think the list altogether was like 27 or 28 that I had that I wanted to talk about. But I kind of had to trim it down a little bit. The first one, though, this is definitely one of my favorites. This is Alice in Chains' Dirt. This was released back in September. This hadn't been reissued since 2009. It had gotten really hard to find. It's definitely one of my favorite 90s albums. And, as far as like grunge music goes, I think this is one of the best ones. I know a lot of people kind of put Nirvana's Nevermind up there, but I think Dirt's probably overall a better album than Nevermind was. But the 2009 reissues had gotten really expensive. I want to say they were over $100, $150, something like that. So this is definitely one. It was great to see it kind of get a wide release. There was a standard black reissue. I think there was a red version that was through Alice in Chains' website. There was an orange version through Walmart. So it's an album that is easily available now. So I guess technically I'm kind of cheating with the next one because it's actually 2 albums. But it is Pearl Jam's Rearview Mirror Volume 1 and Volume 2. So this hasn't been available since 2004. This came out back in March. These originally were released as Walmart exclusives, which is why I've got here. And then later in the year, there were standard black versions that were made available, really widely available now. But before this was released, it was probably $300, $400, $500 to get a copy of this. As a big Pearl Jam fan, it's something that I've wanted for a long time. Some great tracks on here, some stuff that you can't get other than having these Rearview Mirror collection. There was a reissue that came out this year that I thought would never get reissued. It came out as part of Record Store Day back in June, but it is Prince's The Gold Experience. This is something that hadn't been available since I think it was 1995 when this was released. But the track "The Most Beautiful Girl in the World" had been tied up in legal battles since '95, since the mid '90s. So this is something that track wasn't available on any streaming services, and I never thought they would get this repressed because of that track. So it was definitely Record Store Day. I think was kind of hit or miss for me this year. There wasn't a whole lot that really kind of stood out to me, but this album was definitely one that made me go out and get in line for that June drop, just because I love this album so much, and it was something that, like I said, I thought I'd never get reissued. And this is the cool thing is, what they reissued was the gold promo version of that album. So it was really kind of cool to have a copy of this as a big Prince fan. Like I said, something I never thought I'd actually see. The next one is on the list mainly because of how great the packaging is on it, and really this is what the packaging probably should have been all along. As far as like sound wise on it. There was a reissue for Music on Vinyl a couple years back. I've got both versions of it. They both sound equally fantastic. It's an album that, as a kid growing up in the 80s, is one of my favorite later 80s hair metal albums. The album is Pride by White Lion, and this is the first time it's been available on a gatefold, at least as far as I know it's been available on a gatefold, which all along, it's probably how the packaging should have been. I think most albums, if you're going to pay more than $28 probably should be on a gatefold. Like I said, the presentation just looks better. The funny thing is about this version of it, as you can see, the album is white and black, so of course the album color is going to be turquoise, right? I thought that was kind of a interesting color choice for it, but it's a great sounding album, great version. I think this one's a little more pricey than it probably should be. I think I paid like $38 to get this album, but Like I said, I think just having that better packaging is, at least for me, is worth it. I've kind of long thought of the album "What's Going On" by Marvin Gaye to be one of the greatest albums ever recorded. There's been a bunch of reissues of it over the years, but I think the one this year, I think this is kind of the definitive version of it. And that is the 50th anniversary release that came out this year. Like I said, just a great album. The packaging on this is fantastic. But what's really special about this is there's a second LP that comes along with it that includes demo versions and alternate versions of some of the tracks on this album. And it's great to kind of, at least I love kind of going back and listening to the process that Marvin Gaye kind of went through to get where he got on this album. I will say this came out back April 1st, and it's probably one of my most listened to albums this year. An album that had been reissued a bunch of times over the last several years, but it hasn't had a U.S. repress since 2018, other than a picture disc, which, I'm not a fan of picture discs. I know a lot of people out there aren't fans of picture discs either, but I know people that picked up the picture disc just because there was really no other way to get a U.S. pressing of this album without paying the extra fees to have something shipped from overseas. And that album is Holy Diver by Dio. I will say that I have to admit, I'm kind of late to the Dio kind of experience. It wasn't until I think last year when the Dio Black Sabbath reissues came out, that I picked up those albums and actually first started listening to them. And that kind of got me into some of the Dio stuff. Holy Diver is an album that, like I said, I wasn't going to pay the $150 for something that was pressed within the last couple of years just to have it on vinyl. I wanted to wait till a U.S. pressing kind of what was released. And this is the kind of cool. This is the Walmart exclusive version of it. And I think they call this Black Water Swirl is what they call it. But it looks really cool. This is an album that I didn't want to just have it because it looked cool. I wanted to have it because this is a really great album. If you're gonna have a Dio album, I think this is the one to own. But like I said, I knew a lot of people that were looking for a copy of this, so it was great to see this kind of released finally as a wider release. Is pretty much available everywhere. I think the Walmart exclusives are still available on their website too. I will say that there were some people that weren't very happy with this release just because it has a different kind of artwork, slightly different artwork than what the original album had, but it doesn't really matter to me. I think it's kind of, for me, it's great to just have this album on vinyl, to have a copy of it. Just because, like I said, I wasn't going to pay I want to say the last UK pressing was, or European pressing was from 2020, I think, or 2021. And it was still, $90 to $100 plus shipping from overseas to get a copy of it. So it's definitely great to have a copy and get a copy of this for like $30 from your local store. So the next one I think is probably the most recent, or one of the more recent ones on the list. This just came out November 18th. To be completely honest, is within the last couple of years I've grown an appreciation for this album, kind of like the Dio stuff. I'm a fan of this band's 70s albums. And then once it got into the 80s stuff, I kind of lost track or lost some interest in some of this stuff. But it's a great album. I think it's probably the last great album from this band. It is Creatures of the Night by Kiss. And this is an album, like I said, it's kind of grown on me, definitely over the last couple of years. This is a half-speed master. I wasn't going to pay the money for the big box set. Even though it had some cool stuff in it, the Blu-ray audio and things like that, I just couldn't spend a couple $100 for it. I can drop, $25-$30 for the half-speed master. It sounds great. I've got an earlier pressing. It's not an original pressing. I think it's like a late 80s pressing. But sound-wise, this thing sounds far superior to that older pressing. So it's definitely one I had on my list. Another album that was just recently reissued back in November is an album that I've loved for a long time. If you guys have been watching the channel for a while, I'm a big MXPX fan. So it was great to see them reissue 3 of their more popular albums. This album is probably my second favorite album of theirs. It's Slowly Going the Way of the Buffalo. This hasn't been available individually since it was originally pressed back in 1998. Those older original pressings, were super expensive prior to the release of this. I think now you can get an original press for less than $100, but there for a long time, the last, probably 5-6 years, you're going to pay at least $150 to $200 for an original pressing of this. But there's 3 different versions of this available on their website now. You can get it for, I think they're $25 or $28. Great price for a great album. If you're not familiar with them, definitely go online and check them out, because this is a great album. If you're like that late 90s, early 2000s punk rock, this is definitely a great album. And I think they did a great job with this new press and kind of matching the color to the album artwork. So you can see it's kind of got that brown, white, and green kind of split to match the album. There's also a solid green version, which I think is sold out on their website, and also a black version that's available. The next album was originally released back in 1996, but it was never available on vinyl until this year. It was reissued on vinyl, I guess issued on vinyl back in September, and then there was a reissue of it in November with a slightly different color to it. But I've got the first press back in September. It's a great album if you're unfamiliar with it. The album is Wax Ecstatic by Sponge, and if you're, like I said, you're probably more familiar with, or a lot of people are probably more familiar with their album before this, which was Rotting Pinata, which I've got right over my shoulder there. Fantastic album, but this is equally as good. There's only a couple of hits that they had off this album, but it didn't get as big of airplay as Rotting Pinata did, but it's an album that I was really glad to finally have on vinyl. Something I've been waiting for, looking for a really long time, but just, like I said, just a great album overall. The last one on my list today is one that, it's probably my number one reissue of the year. It sounds absolutely incredible. It sounds so good that I'll probably never listen to an older version of this album. But the album is the Animals 2018 remix by Pink Floyd. And you might think to yourself, 2018? Yeah, I did a whole video about why it took 4 years for this remix to come out. But this is the definitive version of this album. If you're a Pink Floyd fan, if you're an Animals fan, this is definitely the one to own. I've got multiple versions of this. I got the standard LP version, which I think there's a lot of issues with the LP release of the standard LP release of it. There's a lot of pops and clicks, and the version I have is no different. There's a couple that, it doesn't sound bad enough that I had to return it. I did keep that version of it, even though there is some sound issues with that album. But this is the box set version. This one sounds absolutely perfect. No issues with it. No pops, no clicks. It's just a great sounding album. And it's probably one of my most played albums since this came out. I think this was released back in, well, the LP was released in September, and then the box set was released in October. So this is definitely probably one of my most played albums in the last couple of months. Well, that's all I got for today, guys. Thanks for checking the show out. Make sure you drop me a comment down below. Let me know what reissues you were really thankful to see come out this year. There's a bunch of great ones. Like I said, I'm going to do part 2 of this. If you're watching this on Thursday, on the day this video comes out, part 2 will be out tomorrow. But make sure you check out that second half, because there's so many great ones that I didn't even go over. But like I said before in the beginning of the video, it was a great year for music, I think. But let me know what you guys think. If you enjoyed the episode, make sure you give me the old thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button down below. And that's all I got. Until next time, keep on spinning. Peace.